Good evening and welcome to the stream this evening. And tonight we are going to carry on with this bracelet that I was making just yesterday. Having solved my mail problems, I can now get on with this, which is looking to be quite a nice, slightly chunky but very sort of open bracelet, because you can quite easily see through it. Which kind of makes it somewhat it's not as though it's a really heavy thick looking chain. The fact that you can see through it makes it look a little bit more acceptable, shall we say. Anyway, I need some more rings opening for this. This is approximately 4.5 inches long. I want another 3.5 inches. So if I measure 3.5 inches, which is to there, and then I count the number of rings, I can get them out in one go. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Now I want 3 inches because it needs to be half an inch for the clasp. So I'm making an 8-inch bracelet, so I'll take it to 7.5 inches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26. So 26 green, 26 red. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, I think there's 27 there, so I'll take one back. Let's get 26 red out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Junior. You would come the awkward way around, wouldn't you? Excuse me, now what are you going to do? What are you going to do now? You're going to sit. Excuse me, guys. We've just got a visit from one of the models that is used on this channel, and there he goes. Now then, yes, you want stroking, I guess. You're going to sit on my knee rather than in the middle of the desk. Come down here. Come on down here, then you can settle down. No, you want to sit in the middle. Yeah, well, if you want stroking, you'll have to come sit on my knee. I know you don't like the trousers I'm wearing, but it's too bad. Come on. Otherwise you'll have to go sit over there. Come on, come on. Let me persuade you a little bit. There we go. You're going to settle down now. This pussycat, although you can only see his foot at the moment, is called Junior. He's one of the models for some of the pyrography that's been done. And no doubt he will be a model for some other stuff in the future. Come on then, settle down. a bit difficult to do anything. Hello, Fear Reaper. That's not Felix, this one's Junior. I know you probably guys can't tell the difference. You can when you see them both side by side. This fella's a lot more chunkier. He's not fat, he's just got more muscle, and his face is different. Plus Felix won't actually sit on my knee or stand on my knee at all, so this fella can't decide quite what he wants. Junior it is, yes. You can settle down. There's kind of a trick with Junior, and that is you get him to settle down as he has done now. Then you stroke him occasionally, and then you stop altogether, and then he'll stay. If I stop stroking him, then usually what he'll do, if I stop immediately like that, is he does that. He stands up, and so you have to stroke him a little bit, and then he'll settle back down again. So you've got to keep doing it occasionally. Otherwise, he'll keep getting up. So, are you going to stay there while I open and close rings? Somehow, I'm not convinced, but we shall see. I'm guessing you guys, though, would prefer that view. Let's see if I can get this camera to sit still. Put a weight on the back of it. There you go. There's a Junior. Well then, Junior, you're on TV. You're more famous than I am. Mind you, that's not hard really, is it? Dear. No, not long enough. Come on, settle down. See, I didn't stroke him long enough. Often enough there, and he jumped up. I'm probably not going to be able to do much, so I might have to put him down in a minute. He is purring though, so he's reasonably content. He doesn't really purr very often. So kind of when he does, he's particularly happy, shall we say. Now, sorry Junior, I know you like to sit on my knee, but it's not going to be, unless you're going to settle down, it's not really possible. There we go. There you go. Hey. Excuse me a minute, guys. I'm just watching him do something quite unusual.
Junior. Junior.
Back in a moment. Come on, it's all right. My lovely wife is sat at my other desk, and Junior went and sat by her, and he's a bit reticent about jumping up on her knee, so I've just lifted him up there, and he might actually stay, which will be good in two ways. One is it means it allows me to carry on streaming, and the second is it will please my wife no end, because Junior doesn't tend to want to sit on her knee much, and she'd love him to do so. And he has settled down. Well, he's sat down. The settling comes in a little bit. Yeah, kind of his behaviour is a bit like that at times. I haven't quite worked out, but you do have to stroke him at a certain interval. You almost only need to touch him, and he's quite happy with that. He'll settle. But if you leave it a little bit too long, he gets up, and after so many times getting up, he'll then give up and go away. But if you keep it up for a while, what you can then do is sort of gradually stop, and then he'll just lay there. He'll just lay, settle down, lay down, and he'll lay there for about an hour or two quite easily. And you don't have to stroke him or anything. Indeed, when he gets to that stage, if you do stroke him, he'll get down. He kind of once he's happy with it, shall we say, anything further, it's sort of, you're annoying me now, go away type of thing. My wife now will not move for anything, not until Junior decides for himself that he wants to get down. It doesn't matter whether that takes him an hour or 3 hours. She's sitting there. See, now at this point, you see, she's also very happy that I'm streaming, because if I wasn't, then Junior would be on my knee. Right, that's the green rings opened, and now we'll try closing the red ones. If I can separate them, that is. Let's close a few up. You know what I was thinking just then? These glasses aren't very clear, and I've just realised I've got the wrong ones on. They've both got smiles on their faces over there. Alright, and I've got to sit a bit closer, haven't I? Now that Junior's gone, so that you get to see what I'm doing. Oh, it always seems to take a long time. Of course, opening rings is a lot easier than closing them, but right. I'm also thinking what to do for the next particular piece. I'm actually looking at this one and wondering whether I can actually do whether or not this would actually work as a stretchy bracelet or not. Because I'm kind of looking at the weaves that you've got to be able to, for a stretchy bracelet to work, you've got to actually be able to stretch it, which is kind of obvious, I guess, but certain weaves, and you know, like this half Persian, for example, basically, would it work? Actually, it might. I was thinking the rings actually intertwine with each other, but they don't. Green rings don't go through green rings, and purple rings don't go through purple rings. So if one of them was stretchy, then in principle it would stretch. I don't know about, well, I suppose even the 4-in-1, although that looks horrendously complicated. I'm not sure. What I might have to do actually is do some little test strings. So maybe we'll do, once I finish this, we'll do that. We'll do a couple of test strings of 4-in-1 and 3-in-1 and full Persian, and see whether or not we can actually make stretchy bracelets. Yeah, I was watching last night. Well, as you know, Fairy, I'm trying to get. Well, last night I was trying to get mail working, which I eventually did. But I did have 3D stream on, and I was half listening to him at the time. I did see him finish the Xenomorph because he finished early, didn't he? I did eventually get my mail working last night. Found a new PC command I didn't know about to check the protected files, so SFC, system file check, which was interesting but not ultimately very useful. And then eventually I just did an Office rebuild, repair, and that fixed it. Although today I noticed I've got my mail working, but all the Office apps have disappeared. So, I may or may not look at that tonight. I might just do another repair on that. But I think Free said he might be doing 1 hour stream. I think he said he got an idea for something, didn't he? He was going to have a think about, but he might do something abstract. Bit more like his insomnia piece, perhaps. I should, well, as a theory says, I should be able to, these red rings should be possible to do them closed. If I can't do these closed, then I can't do a stretchy, because obviously stretchy is you can't open stretchy rings. Well, you can't open these stretchy rings anyway. There was one green ring, I think it was, on that on the chain that I noticed just at the end of the stream last night was in the wrong position. I fixed that just after the stream. It's just a matter of just opening that one and repositioning it and then closing it back. It's not a particularly difficult repair, but on some weaves it can be. But on these, which are fairly open weaves, it's fairly easy to correct. I thought, well, he was kind of teasing. I think was he on about using one of his painted over canvases, I think. I was also watching Poke Ranger last night as well, doing some glass objects. I watched him make a marble. To those of you watching, I don't know if marble means different things in the States. To generally speaking, in the UK, marble, I don't know, it is about that sort of size at most diameter. That would be a big marble, and smaller ones would easily pass through that ring. As you can see, that fits on my finger. But this, the thing that he was doing was sort of about 3 inches or so across. Not exactly what we call a marble in the UK. He was encapsulating a Triforce design, which I think comes from a game, or Trifoil, not sure which it was now, and which he'd made previously. So it was interesting showing how that happened, how they sort of get into the middle of the glass, so to speak. And I think he was making water pipes as well, to give them their polite name. Right, so pliers, green pliers, no, blue pliers, green rings. So I think I'm going to try this by opening 2 of the rings to start with, because I should have done this, I should have put 2 rings on last night and I didn't. So I do have to have 2 of these open. It starts with with these red rings already applied, so your Poke Ranger stream last night had what I would call a really odd ending. I don't know if it's normal in his stream these days, but he went out and climbed a tree. So I'm not quite sure what the intention of that was, but there we go. So I will try and remember to keep this on camera. Right, okay, get hold of that and then put 2 red rings on it. 1, 2, and close it up. Not quite properly. There we go. Right. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. Where's the end? And now, after a visit by Junior, the desk is covered in cat hairs. I can't find the end of this ring. There. I think. Yes, it is. Okay, it was wrong because it needed to come on the inside of the green ring. It was on the outside. I'm not sure whether it's easier working with the red rings closed or whether it's easier working with them open. Either way, of course, it just takes time to get used to it, but one on either side. And sometimes you do things like just then. It went through so easily. It's kind of like all that trouble I had right at the start, and now the rings just almost go through the right place of their own accord. I know they don't, but sometimes it kind of almost feels like that. And 2 red rings. There is something to be said for working with large rings here, like the 1/4 inch, rather than the little sort of what were they, tiny, 2.7mm rings. Not even sure what that is. It's about 1/8 of, or even less of an inch. Has he got down? Yes. Well, that's not bad. Junior's been sat over there on my wife's knee now for about 30 minutes, something like that. That's got to be close to a record. So now both of them have gone. I don't know. Maybe this stream isn't that interesting either for a cat or for my wife. Now the latter's probably true. I think I've probably mentioned it before, but she actually doesn't get why people like watching Twitch or any other live broadcast for that matter, and yet she's quite happy to watch things like Coronation Street. Something about them being made by professionals. Well, true, I suppose, but there again, there's people on Twitch who are doing it as a job, therefore they are professionals. This camera is sitting at an odd angle. 2 red rings before I forget. Right, let's see if I can bend this camera a little bit so it will sit. Right, another green ring. So what is it that everybody's doing tonight that's otherwise keeping them occupied? Because you're all being really quiet in chat tonight. If I didn't have a counter on the dashboard, I think you'd all gone to sleep or something. So I suppose what I should do at this point is just say that what this is, despite the fact I know it's in the stream title and I know it's at the side of the window, but you are looking at me making jewellery. I'm making jewellery using aluminium anodized rings, using a technique known as chainmail. But I tend not to refer to it as chainmail too often, just because everybody's immediate impression of chainmail is making armour, you know, for knights and things like that. Now, whilst people do, this stuff not really suited to a knight, I don't think. Well, at least not in armour. Wouldn't do much to protect him from a sword, or well, even chainmail doesn't protect much from things like arrows. So, but so this is being made, as I say, with anodized aluminium rings. However, this is just one. So I describe myself as an artist and a crafter, because I kind of reckon that this is crafting as opposed to artist work. And I suppose it's a in some cases there's an arbitrary difference between the two. Crafting is kind of repeating the same thing, so like I've made one of these before, if I make another one it'll be identical. Whereas the artist bit is making a picture. No two times you do it are going to be the same, that sort of thing. Generally, so just checking I got that right. So that's the sort of distinction I make. So if I was doing a pyrographic piece, or I was doing even carving, I kind of call that artistry as opposed to craftsman or crafting. So I mentioned a couple of other crafts there. Can't see what I'm doing with the rings. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit and adjust the camera. Where's the mouse? That's getting quite close. It's really hard to get good pictures, I'm afraid, so by all means let me know. So Lifeforge, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. So what I'm doing is trying my best to get these rings to go through in a particular pattern. So and sometimes it goes nice and easy, and other times it's quite hard to get them to go where you want them to go. So I'm trying to feed this. I'll show you it just as soon as I've got this ring to go where I want it to. It's not. Look, I'll show you before I do that, because it gets frustrating. What I'm doing is weaving it so I get a pattern where the green rings are like a chevron going one way and the red rings are a chevron going the other way. And to do that, I'm starting with sort of rings that just sort of are all sort of just on the end there. So what I'm trying to do with the green rings is essentially capture the red ones, and make sure that the ring goes through between the nearly, I've just got confused as to which way I'm doing it and nearly did it wrong. I've got to get this green ring to go alongside this one here, literally alongside it. The chevron pattern comes when I put the next set of rings in place, which hold the green ones apart. And sometimes it's easier than others. There we go. So I've now fed that through the correct place. And now what I'm going to do now is just twist. Okay. Twist this green ring. Focus. Where's the focus point on here? Somewhere around there. So you can see the rings. What I'm doing is trying to get them to both align and close the gap. There's a very small gap now. I'll show you a ring separately, but it's not always easy to see until I close. But this is twisted out of alignment, but there's a very small gap. If I was just to twist this closed, there'd be a little tiny gap. So what I do with the two pliers is I squeeze the ring slightly, which closes that gap, and then twist them so that it virtually disappears. And indeed, on some of these rings it virtually does disappear. Again, if I can get the focus point on here, there is a join between two rings just where that light spot is on the red ring. and it becomes almost impossible to see. And even for me here, it becomes almost impossible to see. Sometimes I can't, and I actually end up, if I need to open it, I end up having to run my nail along the edge of the ring, and then I can sometimes, it still is sometimes, I can sometimes feel it, but occasionally you get almost a really perfect match, and I can spend 5 minutes trying to find the edge of the ring if I need to split it apart. So now then, I've got to position these two red ones, these new ones, on either side, so they'll form that chevron shape, and then the green ones that I put through will sort of lock those two red ones in place when I get hold of it. So I've kind of got to feed it. It kind of goes around the two red ones, doesn't it? So I don't know if you can see it where I've put it, just through that gap there. Now that's kind of then locked the two red things in place. I forgot to turn those off. So that's now locked these last two red rings in place. They now will stay in that position, that chevron position, which is what I was after. And before I close this green ring, what I'm going to do is add another two red ones onto it for the next section. So you'll see me twisting it backwards and forwards. That's doing two things. There's a process called work hardening. When you bend metal, if you repeatedly bend it, at the bend point it gets harder, basically, or stiffer, and then so when you stop, it then resists bending more in that particular position. It's called work hardening. So that means that when I stop twisting, it has a tendency to want to stay exactly where it is, which is good because you don't want it to come open of its own accord. But these rings also, well, any metal, especially wire, which this is the rings are made from wire, has a memory effect. So if you bend it, it tends to want to unbend itself into a particular to where it was before you bent it. Now, whilst the work hardening resists that, it doesn't always resist it 100%. And so what you'll get is, with chainmail, either jewellery or chainmail as in armour type chainmail, unless it's been riveted together, the rings will occasionally, like that sort of is a perfect join that I've just made there. You can just see that little blob there, which is at the end of my nail there, but that's the join in it. So that little bit just there. It will sometimes just over a couple of minutes just ease itself back towards its previous position. So occasionally I do have to come back in and sort of look down the bracelet and go things like that ring there is slightly out of position. It's sprung back a little bit, so I just tweak it, and now it'll probably almost certainly just stay there forever now. So again, position these two. I need them one either side of the red to form that chevron shape again, and then we just carry on again. Just repeat the same thing we've just done. Now, what I was about to say also, having just explained that, is you're watching me make jewellery, chainmail jewellery, and I've missed a ring out. So I've only got it through one of the red ones, so I've only locked one of them in place, not both of them, so I now need to just tweak that. Probably take this green out in order to get it back in. Sometimes that's easier than trying to fiddle it. But I do other crafts as well. I mentioned some of them a moment ago. So pyrography, creating images using a heated tool on wood. Pyrography literally translated is fire writing. I usually translate it as painting with heat. So I create I won't say a black and white, but a monochrome image using a heated tool on wood. I do relief carving, so that is using wood with some sharp chisels. I use hand, on stream anyway, I use hand chisels, and we get wood shavings all over the place. And create, well, a relief carving is, I sometimes describe it as a 2.5D image. People are familiar with things like statues, so they're full 3D, they stand alone by themselves. A relief carving is usually made out of more of a flat piece of wood, and you carve away the surface of the wood, leaving the back of the wood in place. So once you've carved your object, it's a bit like you've taken an object, cut it in half and stuck half of it to a picture frame. And that's what relief carving is. I also do scraper board. Now scraper board is it's a backing board which has been coated with china clay and then covered with Indian ink. And once that's, well, I don't make it, I buy it like that. But then what you do is you literally scrape away at the surface, scraping away the Indian ink to reveal the china clay underneath, which makes it a white scratch, if you like, on a black surface. And depending on how you scratch it, how many you do in a particular space, how wide they are, how thick they are, etc., depends on what it looks like and how bright it looks. And then you can form images using that technique. Different sorts of scratches, different directions, patterns, all sorts of techniques available there. And you can also use coloured ink to actually colour the clay. So once you've scratched away some of the clay, you can apply ink to that clay, and then the clay basically turns that colour. You can scratch it again, which turns it back to being white, or you can leave it whatever colour you've coated it in. So there's pyrography, there's scraper board, there's carving, there's this jewellery making, and then there's one called punchcraft. Punchcraft is effectively a rug making system. It's a hand method, or the way in which rugs are made industrially. Not necessarily carpets, because they tend to be woven, not punched, but rugs are usually loops punched through a backing material, which is what punchcraft is. So I have a material stretched reasonably taut. I then use a needle, a special needle with thread, punch the needle through the material and pull it back out, leaving a loop of thread on the other side, and those loops then form the picture. So all of those get done. Creepy face. Not much good that did you, didn't it? Right, another. Obviously I can't count either the greens or the reds, because I thought I'd got exactly the same number of both, and apparently I didn't. What am I doing? Whatever I was doing wrong. There we go, that's better. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this and just see how long it is. Okay, about 6.5 inches. I want it to go to 7.5, and because then if I put a there we go. If I put a clasp on the end of it, a clasp is generally about 1/2 inch long, depending on what clasp you use. So we need to add about another inch of rings. Okay, with that, yep, that's through. Checking it's through in the right way. I've got a red ring here which has very slightly gone back to its original position, so in a moment I'll just close that one up. I'll just tweak it a little bit. One of the reasons for tweaking, there's a couple of reasons for tweaking it really. One is these rings they're anodized before they cut them. These rings are made actually from a long length of wire which is coiled around a metal rod called a mandrel, and then what they then do is slide that off the mandrel and anodize the coil of wire, and then once that's done they then take a really fine saw, and by fine it's kind of like the thickness of a piece of paper, and cut through just one side of the coil, and what that does is separate each of the individual coil turns of the coil from the rest of the coil, thus forming a ring. And so what that means is the rings have a silver edge centre on them. They're not coated because they were done. The coating was done before they went before they were cut. So what happens is if they're not quite closed properly, sometimes you get a flash of silver when you look at a piece, and that just says, hey, there's a ring that's not quite closed properly. What can also happen is if it's not quite closed properly, is if you're wearing it, it can scratch a little bit, which of course is a little bit uncomfortable. But the other thing that can sometimes happen is that gradually that they catch on each other, and over a long period of time the thing will just open up a little bit, and you potentially then the bracelet itself could a ring could drop off. Highly unusual for that to happen. It takes a lot for that to happen, but usually all that happens is you get like a little scratch on your just a slight irritating sort of thing. Okay. Now put the two red ones on. Actually, I might have exactly the right number of rings. When you finish this, you don't add the two rings for the last set of rings, so to speak. When you put the last greens in, you don't add red to them. That way, you don't have sort of two just hanging off the end like this. They actually finish in a nice pattern. So I'll show you that in a second, because I'll just check the length of this is 7.5 inches, and if it is, then we'll be just adding the last two green rings. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's have a quick measure. Nope, probably a little bit short, so we're going to need here is one, add those, probably another couple, so that green will take it to about there. Yeah, let's get another 1, 2, another 4 green out, another 4 red out. I'll put 2 on and then we'll see just how long it is, and then if necessary we'll add another 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll just open a pair of green and open a pair and close a pair of red. And I think I was going to tweak one of those reds on there, so I'll have just a quick look at that bracelet. Okay, close that up. I think I saw one of these reds was a little bit off. That one. So just grab it, twist it very slightly just to position it, and then it's gone. There we go. Right, so I'm using 2 sets of pliers in my right hand, or 2 different pliers in my right hand, by the way, because these, which are called chain nose pliers that I'm currently using now, got a fine nose on them. It makes it easier to hold the ring and move it into position. But for these big rings, it's a bit easier and less likely to slip if I get hold of it with a wider nose, because I can hold it effectively over a wider part of the ring, and that makes it a lot less likely to slip. That's important to me, because while I'm putting pressure on a ring like I'm doing to squeeze it to hold it, if it slips, I'm very likely to damage the ring, usually by scraping the anodization off, which makes it look silver, of course, and then effectively that ring is no use to me. And since these rings can be, well, these are about at about 5p each, I obviously don't want to be wasting them if I don't have to. Okay, check the length that I've got on there. Yeah, it needs the extra pair on, so sometimes if you wear like a 7.5-inch bracelet, as you get these bigger, wider, chunkier bracelets, you sometimes need to add a little bit of length, because the clasp itself comes from the, generally speaking, from the centre. Now on here, of course, the centre is about 1/8 of an inch higher than your it's not, the clasp isn't down here, it's up here, half the width of the ring, and these are 1/4 inch internal diameter rings, so about 1/8 of an inch. Now if you imagine your wrist is 7.5 inches round, when you add 1/8 of an inch all the way around to that, you add quite a bit to the circumference. And so with a bracelet that lies flat, and something like this one which lies flat, and the clasp will literally lie against your skin, this might measure 7.5 inches, but when you get as I say, these ones here which stand proud of you by more, then you need them a little bit bigger. Exactly how much bigger is a little bit depends on, it's one of those depends questions, and it'll depend on things like what the clasp is, just how wide these rings are, how flexible the bracelet is, and things like that. And also depends on just how tight you want to wear a bracelet. Some people like them quite close fitting, other people like them to be loose. Generally speaking, you have them tight enough so that they won't actually go over your knuckles. That way you don't lose your bracelet by accident when you put your hand down. Because once you've worn a bracelet for a little while, and it can be only a matter of like 10 minutes or so, you kind of forget you're wearing it, and you don't notice it if it slips off. Now this is the last ring to go on, and well, last of this pattern to go on, and typically it's trying to be awkward. It wants to sort of make its name, make sure it's remembered. Right, there we go. So all the rings in the right place through there. Yeah, close that up. Then I'll add the final 2 rings, and these will be just green rings. And the job of these 2 green rings is just to capture these 2 red ones. So instead of them being just loose like this, and I could do that if I wanted to add the clasp to the end, but generally I'd normally do that using a slightly smaller ring. For because it's easier. Generally the smaller, when you go through a clasp, you generally need with these big rings anyway, you generally need a slightly smaller diameter wire. But the other thing about it is it will tend to hold these 2 in the chevron pattern that I showed earlier. And I'm off stream, off window again. So it helps to keep the look of the whole bracelet, just by putting these 2 on and locking the red ones in position. and one of those red ones needs tweaking. So just to see if I can show you, can you see that slight sliver of silver just there? Big Boy Bryson, hello, welcome back to the stream. I believe you dropped in before. Nice to see you back. So I'm just going to tweak that, just a slight twist, that's all it needs, and then it should stay in that position. And the final green ring. Now at this moment in time I'm not going to put a clasp on it. I've only got one spare clasp. I normally, well, I almost exclusively use sterling silver clasps, and that is because some people, the skin oil on some people, and my wife is one of them, actually will very quickly eat through silver plate or gold plate. So you get clasps which are silver plated or gold plated, and generally they're made out of copper or some other cheap metal, which is then copper plated and then silver or gold plated on top. But some people's skin oil actually dissolve that silver or gold plating. It's really, really, really thin. You know, you're talking sort of 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch, and it sort of comes off very easily if your body's that inclined, which of course then leaves you with a copper coloured clasp, which sometimes looks okay, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's not what you wanted. So I used either sterling silver, which is, I would say it's not 100% pure silver, it's 925 parts per thousand of silver, I think, in whatever parts are measured in, I'm not sure, which is why it gets stamped 925, so it's not pure, but it's as close as you get. Or I use something called filled gold, and that's effectively like taking 2 sheets of metal like copper, say, and gold. They sandwich them together and then roll them, getting progressively thinner, so they get sort of squeezed together and bonded together, and then your gold layer is sort of several orders, you know, like 100, 200 thousandths of an inch thick, and it doesn't get dissolved basically. So that's now 7.5 inches long, and that's the end now. As you can see, the red, if I focus it, the red holds its chevron shape, and the green one kind of does as well, because it sort of leads in. You know, it's a bit like an arrow shape, but when I put the clasp on, the clasp will sit, or the ring for it will sit there, and as you can see, that's now made the chevron shape on the green and the chevron shape on the red. C Street, CST, welcome to the studio this evening. You don't think you have? Okay, well, not a problem. Sometimes you see people with similar names. It's so with a, I mean, it doesn't have a clasp on it, but it would be sort of that sort of diameter. Oops, there we go. So one Christmas themed bracelet here. This is called. It's a ring weave which is called Persian. It's called a full Persian, and it's called a full Persian because you've got 2 green, 2 red. Not the colours don't matter, but it's 2 and 2 on each side, as opposed to a half Persian, which has only, like this for example, 1 ring on each side, 1 green, one. This blue is actually purple. The camera doesn't like purple. It always represents it as blue. Something to do with the lighting, I suspect, and the camera sensor itself. But that's a half Persian because it's got 1 on each side. It's a bit like if you 2 of those back to back, you get that. But that's and same with this. This is also a half Persian, but it's made a little bit tighter. So again, it's still only 1 green and 1 purple on each side. But we've done It's quite a nice. It rolls really nicely. I love playing with these when I've made one like this. This feels a bit well. It feels hollow, shall we say? Which of course it is. It's warm. It's not a cold metal. It isn't aluminium, and it bends really nicely. But this is a bracelet. What I might do at some point is make a necklace the same to go with it. So make a pair. What I'm going to do now is do exactly the same thing, but instead of using these metal rings, what I'm going to try and do is use these blue rings. I think these are the right ones that I want. I'll just compare ring sizes. Might be a bit big. So what I might need to do is use a slightly different. I've got some red and green. These are stretchy rings. So if I get a red one out, put it on the end of the pliers here, it stretches. And so that means you can make bracelets. Overdone with it. Oh, there they are. They're in front of me. You can make bracelets like this, for example, which stretch, so they don't need a clasp. They just roll over your hand. Oh, this one. This is like a chevron shape. So actually, what ring size? Maybe they are this size. That one and that one. No, they're not that size. Okay, I'm just going to have a look. No, that's not going to be those. It might be those, that. Now then, what I've got is my box of rings here, or a box of rings, and I think I got these particular ones to match against that. Means I've got some spare ones, because I know I don't have as many in here, so I'm just going to get a, yeah, so I don't know if you can see that, but they're virtually identical size. Oops, there we go. Virtually identical size. So that's the ones I got it to match against. So I'm going to try with these small rings. I don't actually know if these are big enough for this. What's the aspect ratio on these? 5. Yeah, there should be. When you're doing this, are these the 5/30? No, they're 3/16. They're the wrong ones. Excuse me whilst I just go digging around in front of me. Actually, these might do the job as well. What size are they? 5mm, and they're 4.1 now. I could have sworn I bought some. I've got a load of rings in front of me which I have yet to sort of unpack. So I'm just looking to see whether I've got the right. There they gone. millimetre, and these are so what I'm working at is they're 4mm internal diameter, the green ones are 5mm internal diameter. They want to be about the same, so these little tiny ones are the wrong ones, and I'm not sure I've got enough 5mm rings, unless I've got another pack somewhere, which could be in here, and it's not, so I don't have them in there. Right. Therefore, yeah, okay. Right, so what we're going to do then I'm going to use some red rings that I've got in here just to make up a test length and see if they are. So I'll use some red ones, but instead of using the red flexible rings, I'm going to use the green flexible rings. To do this, and this is where we have fun, because this is the fun part, is joining these things together. So if I started with the green, the red ones were there, so those are actually here. The fun part of any weave, fun being the not very fun part at all, is when you start a weave. Some weaves, like Byzantine, work almost straight away. They join together, hold the pattern, and there's no problem whatsoever with them. But other weaves, like these Persian weaves, quite often will not hold a pattern for quite a while. So you have to get about 7 or 8 rings together in the pattern for them to actually work. Now I've just put that through there. I'm also not sure if I'm starting this the right way for the green rings to actually be the ones that stay closed all the time, but we shall find out whether I'm right in a minute. So even though this is a test length, I'm still trying to make sure I close the rings properly. Because ultimately, even though it's a test length, at some point what I could do is turn it actually into a full bracelet. And this is where it sort of gets fiddly when you're starting to sort of try and just put these together for the first one, because they kind of, as I mentioned, don't really hold a shape very well until you get a few rings in. So I'll try and come back onto frame. Now I should have actually an advantage with the fact that they are stretchy, because I can sort of bend them out, bend them in and out of the way. Okay, that one has moved. Okay, As I mentioned, these things get a little bit fiddly. Open that a touch more and try this again. Got to get these first two in the right position. Once they're in the right position, and I get a ring through which will lock them in position, then we're away. But until I do that, and that's kind of the hard part. Okay, I've got a little gap right down the middle there, down there, which is where, down that space there, which is where I want to get the ring through. Leatherhorn, how often do I do pyrography? About every 10 weeks. We're carvings next, and then pyrography follows it. So next time we'll be doing pyrography is probably in about 5 weeks time. And no, I do full pictures. I don't write. It's not that I can't write, it's just I actually the art that I prefer is picture style pyrography. And you are going to go through there. I'll show you an example in a moment, just as soon as I get this ring to go where I want it to go. Keeps insisting on, alright, well let's do it like that then. And then I should be able to twist it that. No, it's not. No, I can't do it that way either. Okay. And that ring is now no good to me. So that's an example of the pyrography. That's upside down because the camera's reversed, so I'll do it that way. There we go. And I'll just tilt it so see if I can show this without so much of the light on. I'm holding it upside down and it's kind of a bit awkward trying to work out which is the right way to do it. But there, Salute to Sunset is this piece, it's called. So you've got a giraffe in the background, you've got an elephant saluting, if you like, the sunset. So you've got a savanna type of environment, and it's you've got the dark sky in the background and a few shadows on the bottom coming on, yeah, as the sun's going down. And then we do other things. Here's a few other pieces. So we've got a pussycat who was on stream earlier tonight, and another one, so it's a different pussycat, and then a door hanger with a fox that's awake on one side and one that's asleep on the other. Ibrox7, thank you very much for that, and Leatherhorn. Yeah, I suspect it'll be about 4 or 5 weeks before I do it again. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can never remember. Well, it could be as much as little as 2 weeks. It depends on It's either carving or pyrography next, and I'm not quite sure which one. It might just depend on what subjects I can think of to actually do, and I keep forgetting which order they come in anyway, so it's kind of whatever I feel like doing to some extent. So now I want to use a different ring. The red ring I discarded because of this particular ring size I've got here, I don't actually like using them that much for this because the red coating on this particular ring size is very fragile. When I bend it, it sometimes cracks off, and that's what happened with the ring that I just discarded a moment ago. So I don't use a ring if the colour has become damaged. It can be really awkward at the start here. Part of the problem is just that I don't have a lot to hold on to. I've got a feeling these rings are probably a little bit too small, but we shall have a go and see. The fact that they're stretchy makes a difference. So don't know. We'll add a few more and we'll see. So far I am thinking this isn't going to work at this size. That space amongst these rings is really close. We'll persevere just a little bit and we'll see. Another couple of rings onto this and we'll see what it looks like with a couple more added. So let's just prep a couple of red rings. If you're still around, Leatherhorn, of course the best way to catch me when I do a stream, of course, is to push the follow button. But I would say that, wouldn't I? I do tweet out as well, so if you want to, if you use Twitter, If you want to follow me, the details are below the stream windows, but it's at Zaraganat. I do tweet out when I go live, and the stream title is in the tweet. So if I'm doing pyrography, it will say I'm doing pyrography or some variation on that. Leatherhorn, thank you very much for doing that. That is most kind of you. I do appreciate you doing that. Thank you very much. But I say, if you just want to, rather than having to drop in, if you just want to monitor the tweets, then they should tell you. There'll be some variation on pyrography or wood burning or something like that in the stream title. I don't actually burn wood, by the way. Pyrography isn't about burning wood. The nearest you might call it is charring it. But as you saw, there's some really light colours involved in doing it. So I tend not to call it wood burning again. It's a bit like calling this chainmail. It kind of gives a slightly unrealistic impression to some people as to exactly what is being done. Yep, I have got that through there. Okay. Right, one of the things I can say about this is it is incredibly fiddly, so I'm not sure I'll do too much more of this. We shall see whether it's working, but I can see this easily taking 2 or more hours to do a simple bracelet, and that's not ideal. Well, this certainly isn't very much fun to do, so I think I will close this ring up and then we'll say, whilst this might work, I'm not going to do it. Where on earth is the end of that? That's gone through the wrong place. Okay. Okay, technically it works. Practically, nah. I mean, it doesn't look too bad, but it's just making it is it's just too time consuming. Pliers are great. I have about 20 different types. Yeah, I have 2. Well, I have 3 types, I suppose. I've got a pair of these are parallel. Let me pull that down again. These are parallel jaw pliers, which I really like. I wish they had handles like this, but they don't. these are great for holding rings, because it with pliers like this, as you close it, they have a tendency to squeeze the rings out, because it's, as you can see, it's a V shape, whereas these are parallel, so these close nicely on a ring and don't tend to push it anywhere. The other pliers, with them having the V shape, they tend to push the rings out if you apply enough force. Same with these. These are, as iBox 7 obviously knows, these are called a chain nose because of the fine point to get in amongst the chain, whereas these are flat nose. So, and these are not too. These are great for the flat nose are great for the larger rings. I don't particularly like these because the handles have got no padding, so they tie my hands after a while. And as you can see, I have made some adjustments by bending that spring out of the way, because they were really too strong a spring. And then I've got another pair around here, anyways, where the noses have been bent over. I don't use these too often, but they can be quite useful, because instead of having to hold your arm out at a sort of an odd angle, you can hold it nice and comfortably, and the pliers are bent so you can get into corners. But yeah, the parallel ones are nice. Kind of show you, because they close right. Just pausing for a minute because I think Twitch is going to disconnect me. That's weird. According to OBS, I'm not transmitting, I'm not dropping any frames.